Hello, fellow book readers. My name is John, and today I am going to do my weekly reading update. This week was a very good week of reading, I would say. I didn't have any 5-star reads like I did last week, but I did have a bunch of 4-star reads. One book that fell a little flat. We'll get to that, though, in a little bit. As always, I will be talking about spoilers when I talk about these books. I just generally like to do that. I think it's a lot easier to review books when you talk spoilers. So if you want to see what books I'm going to talk about, look down below. They will be listed in my description. But anyway, I did read 5 books this week, and the first book I read was a reread, The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. Now, I read this book back in, I think, the year 2000, but it might have been the year 1999. This is the first fantasy book I ever read with a map. I think it might be the first fantasy book I ever read, period. My memory of this book is I read the first chapter of Sorcerer's Stone, and it was in Uncle Vernon Dursley's point of view, so I put the book down. I was, child. I don't want to read about Uncle Vernon Dursley. I don't care about this character at all. Picked up the Phantom Tollbooth, read that in like a few days, and I loved it. And I'm happy to say it still holds up as an adult. This book is great. I gave it 4 stars. I just love the humor in this book and the wordplay. I mean, you got the watchdog named Tok who only ticks and his brother named Tick who only talks. You got the Jump to Conclusions Island where you can only jump to it. You got the Bah Humbug. You got the Kingdom of Dictionopolis where you only eat words. And then it's the opposite in the Digitopolis world. The king of Dictionopolis is called Azaz, A-Z-A-Z. You got the literal spelling bee. There's so much good wordplay in this that are just hilarious. You get like the 5 counts that advise the king of Dictionopolis. It's so good, and the theming in this book is so great about a child who's bored, who finds his way into the Phantom Tollbooth and goes to a different land, and he learns that maybe you shouldn't be bored. There are lots of things in life to be excited about. And it wraps it all around this journey to find these 2 lost princesses to save this kingdom. Rhyme and reason. Like I said, the wordplay in this is great. The humor in it's great. The theming in it's great. The pacing in it's great. It has some really great illustrations. This book still holds up, even as an adult. 4 stars. I do think there are some people that probably won't love this book, but I think that people do need to expand their horizons on what they read. Like, I think there's way too many people, especially in the fantasy community, that only read epic fantasy or only read like grimdark. And it's like, there's a lot of good fantasy out there. Explore other subgenres, please. Like, so much good in every subgenre. You can find good middle grade. You can find good young adult. You can find good new adult. You can find good adult. You can find good grimdark. You can find good epic. You can find good high. You can find good low fantasy. You can find good romantasy. You can find good urban. You can find good magical realism. You can find good literary fantasy. There's so many good stuff. You can find good science fantasy, I would say, like science fiction that blends with fantasy. There's so many good subgenres of fantasy. Please, I implore you all to just explore other subgenres. The second book I read this week, now that I went on that rant, the second book I read this week was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I love this book. 4.5 stars. Near perfect. It probably just doesn't peak as high as I would say a perfect book does for me, but it was damn close. Like, I love so much about this book. I did think the beginning was a little bit weird, which is maybe another thing that keeps it in the 4.5 stars. But the weirdness was fun to read. It wasn't like weirdness that I hated to read about. It was kind of fun. It's about a man stuck in a labyrinth by himself, and he loves to explore this labyrinth. This labyrinth has oceans and statues and tons of mysteries, and there's he names these bodies that he finds, and there's one other person there called the Other, and they're doing like scientific research, but it turns out there's a sinister plot going on around it. And I thought the last half of this book was action-packed, the answers delivered. Some of it was predictable, but not all of it. And I thought the end was actually going to go in a different direction. I was like, Piranesi's just going to want to stay in this labyrinth. And it turns out to leave it, and I wanted him to want to leave the labyrinth, and he does, and it's perfect. Very satisfying ending. The last line of this book is so good. I loved everything about this book. The wonder, just the way that Susanna Clarke writes prose and atmosphere is perfect. And this is another atmospheric fantasy that delivers for me this month. This month has been filled with great atmospheric fantasy. I don't know what it is about standalones, but they seem to just deliver on the atmospheric fantasy vibes. And the atmospheric vibes in this were great. theming of like depression and loneliness and sort of how you overcome that is perfection. Really love the theming in this book. Love the characters. Piranesi is one of my favorite characters I've ever read. He's definitely one of my favorites of this year period. Just so innocent and easy to root for. And I think it's hard to write that, especially because this character is, an adult. But she does such a great job with it. Yeah, I can't recommend this book enough. 4.5 stars. I was skeptical going into it. Shouldn't have been. This book delivered in every possible way. Okay, and then next up, I read Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This was probably the book I was least looking forward to reading this month. That was on my TBR. And I'm happy to say that I was wrong. I should have been looking forward to reading this. This book was great. It was not what I expected at all based on the first 70 pages and the blurb. I was like, okay, we're just going to read about this girl who spins, who turns can turn silver into gold. And I was like, there's not really going to be any magic. And then in the beginning of the book, it's like, okay, yeah, there is no magic. She's just kind of like a hustler. She's like hustling people. But then it turns into this epic fairy tale, basically, where there's tons of magic and there's this ice king who's evil, but also maybe good. And then there's this demon and there's this giant fight and there's these kingdoms and really good stuff here. I really loved this book in a lot of different ways. I loved how it just flipped the switch into this sort of epic fairy tale, but it kept the good theming involved of discrimination, and it really touched on powerful theming with that. And I like that about this book. It managed to intertwine those themes with this sort of epic fairy tale going on around it. And I thought the conclusion was great. And I thought this is another book that had a fabulous last line. I love the last line of this book. Yeah, this book was great. Now, I did have one small problem with this book that stopped it from getting into the perfect category, and that would be that I thought she shoehorned some point of view characters in here that didn't need it. This book was a bit long. I didn't think it was overly long. I thought it was still paced pretty well, but I did think that the Tsarina's handmaiden and the Tsar himself didn't need to be point of view characters. I thought their story could have still worked without them being point of view characters, and it felt like it just added stuff to the book that didn't need to be there. Now, they didn't have that many chapters, thankfully, but to me, those characters were not needed as point of view characters. But that's literally my only complaint about the book. Otherwise, this book is perfect. I gave it 4 stars. I think it's great. Just some small pacing issues kept it from being into that higher perfect tier. But 4 stars, great. This is a book I would reread any day of the week. I can't recommend it enough. I'm happy I read it. Spinning Silver. And it's another great atmospheric fantasy. The winter vibes around it is perfect. I didn't read it during the winter, but if you're looking for a winter book, Spinning Silver, for sure. And then next up, I read Circe by Madeline Miller. I expected this book to be good, but I was a little bit concerned when I read the blurb and saw that it's just, it's about, it's about Circe trapped on an island for most of the book. And it's like, okay, that's... And look, I know the tale of Circe. I know I've read Odysseus before, so I know that she is, stuck on an island. I was aware of that going into this book. It's not like it was a surprise when I picked it out. But I wanted to read it anyway because I love, Greek mythology, and I really like the story of Odysseus. So, and thankfully, Odysseus was in this book. There's a whole section of Odysseus. This book really felt like there was 4 different storylines going on that make up the entire thing. You got the Odysseus part. You got the... part where she goes helps her sister birth. You get the beginning where she gets exiled. You got the part with I forget the guy's name, but the who she has a crush on basically, and it doesn't go well. You got obviously her brother and the Jason story. That part was bound to happen in this book. And then of course you get the main story of the book with her son and his half brother and his mother, and how they come to her island, and she has to make some certain decisions. And then she falls in love with the one son, not her son, her son's half brother, and how the quest to turn back into a mortal and the magic and the witchcraft in this book. It's so good. I just loved the small snippets of Greek mythology we got in this book. I did a terrible job of explaining it, but the small snippets of Greek mythology we got in this book were not small snippets. The big snippets of Greek mythology, but we got multiple different myths going on at once in this book. All really worked. I really enjoyed that she was able to somehow make the island not seem boring, even though she was like by herself trapped on an island for most of the book. And then the end had a really satisfying resolution. The theming was perfect. The antagonists were perfect. I like that the gods were not. I was worried that she was going to get the gods wrong, and they were going to be just like sort of these like good characters, and that's not what they were. They were gray in all shades of gray. There's a lot of great stuff going on in this book. I really admire the work. It's not that short, but not that long either, and it's paced really well. Yeah, this book's great. 4 stars for me. I'm very happy I read this book. Okay, and then finally I read The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. This book was very weird. And look, I admire that it went for this very unique concept. Like, this story idea that he had was really fun. It was like a great idea. It's very unique. It was very cool to see the way he laid it out. But the book was just a little bit too weird for me. And look, that's just a personal thing. Like, I'm sure some people this won't be weird at all, but this book was very strange, and I just did not enjoy the strangeness too much. Now, I will say the last 35% of the book, not 35%, probably the last 30% of the book, I thought was pretty good. Like, I could tell that this book was, like, most people are going to find this book to be great. Even the climax, I enjoyed. But getting there was a bit of a chore. I didn't love the way he wrote dialogue. It did not feel like real speaking in my opinion, like real conversation voice. Like, it felt kind of fake and phony. And that's a kind of a pet peeve of mine. I hate when I read a conversation voice, like, well, this doesn't sound real at all. That's what this book reminded me of. He also threw in just a ton of profanity. There's a lot of like needless cursing and profanity in this book. Kind of like Crescent City 1, but in Crescent City 1, I thought Sarah did a much better job with that. It just felt more authentic to me, even though there was like a ton of cursing. Here, it didn't feel authentic at all. It felt forced and phony. There was a lot of humor in here that fell flat for me. And like I said, it was just a very strange story with a lot of weird stuff going on, and I didn't love it. I did like the concept of this like sort of god, and he has like this library with his adopted children, and he's sort of training them, but like harshly training them. And the end, the mysteries sort of unravel with, we find out that actually he was training Carolyn to be the god the entire time, not David. And it was Carolyn who killed her father, not David. A lot of good mysteries at the end. I like the end had sort of like this good end when it could have went for this like sort of gray bad end. That's not what the author went for. He ended up going for this like sort of happy good end. Not that worked, but again, this book just wasn't for me. Too weird. Didn't love the conversationist voice. I thought it was paced kind of not great either. So yeah, for me, it's just a 2-star book. I didn't hate my time here. It wasn't a 1-star book like The Familiar was last week, but I can't also tell you that I enjoyed my time here either. I wouldn't say it was good. It was not a 3-star book for me. This is a 2-star book. It's fine. It was just fine. I'm not mad that I read it, but this is not a book I'll ever really think about again, and I certainly won't ever reach for on the shelf. I don't have the physical copy of this book. I read it on my Kindle, so I can't show it off. But those are the 5 books I read this week. Like I said, it was a pretty great reading week for me. I read 4 great books, 4 books that I ranked 4 stars or higher. Then the last book I read was just a 2-star book. But overall, I was very happy I read these books, and Standalone September has been awesome. Through 10 books so far, there's just been a lot of great atmospheric theming. I've been enjoying my time with it. Next week, I hope I can tackle one of the 5 books. I'm not really sure, because I do plan on reading one longer book next week, so it might only be 4, maybe even 3. We'll see, but I will definitely update you guys next week on my reading. Thanks for watching. Let me know down below what you guys have read this week, or if you've read any of the books I read. Let me know what you thought.